You are a painter. You work sort of in this 20th century Cubist contemporary vibe. Why don't you just tell us a little how you got started on that? And
Sure, yeah. So, to be honest, like in a nutshell, like an early influence probably was like Norman Rockwell, like on a high school level.
okay.
Like that was kind of art to me and kind of something like, oh, I could get my head around, so to speak. I guess what college should be for was that's like when I had really good professors being like, look at Philip Guston or look at Picasso, things like that. And then the sort of my library, if you will, of like imagery started like opening up to sort of that more cubist realm and kind of more, I don't know, intellectual imagery or something like that.
And you sort of have these characters within your paintings. How do you sort of develop those characters, or do they have like backstories, or are they just sort of self-reflections? Or?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It changes a fair amount, but much like in my daily life that I pull from, there are sometimes like veils with the imagery, and certain like boundaries that I don't need the viewer to know, but it's an everyday reality of like kind of a Charlie Brown kind of idea of either stumbles and falls that like are an everyday kind of human endeavor, but also like my own kind of trip falls is like just going about through life. So characters, while occasionally are kind of like nebulous imagery, have connections with that kind of everydayness and things like that I'll encounter, but also kind of connecting with kind of the crazy sort of imagery of like a Peter Saul imagery or Philip Guston.
And this has always been a part of your practice. So Lisa's introduction to your work, do you happen to remember the first piece that Lisa bought from you?
I do, yeah. Oddly enough, in this like hot summer, she bought a painting called Iceman, and it's this pretty like crazy figure. It's a relatively small painting, maybe like 15 by 15 inches, and it's this monstrous figure that is chopped up in sort of like delineations of like yellow, blue, and red. And that was a painting in this Arts and Leisure show, part of Freight Volume Gallery that I had a show in 2016.
And this was the first time that you had met her?
Yes, correct.
So you'd never heard of her before, you just happened to, like, how did you meet?
I met her, I think so, a mutual acquaintance of ours who was in my community, very much an art enthusiast, and someone that was like socially around and also a collector himself. He was the person that sort of was like our connector point. And he brought the show to her attention, which, while I feel really proud of that it was a strong show, it was an uptown show. You had, like, through word of mouth, someone probably would have had to tell you about the show. And it was through him that he brought my work attention more or less to Lise.
And then, so as you know, having an artist-collector relationship can be different across the board. There tends to be this stigma of collecting art is very intimidating, and going to galleries, and sometimes even just approaching an artist can be intimidating for a collector.
Sure.
How does that compare to sort of the relationship that you have with Lise?
It's a good question. She does seem, or has been, an anomaly in like the collector sphere, and the collectors that I've been lucky enough to have, she does stand out as someone that has, you know, she's got her own life and she's got a very interesting, busy life, but she sought out to have a personal connection with me, and I had the pleasure to be in her apartment and see her collection firsthand. More than a few artists that I knew personally, but it was cool that also through our mutual acquaintance and this other artist that there was like that connector.
Sort of like that bond, which you don't really see that often amongst like the collector-artist relationship. Would you say that it's not only an anomaly, but is a good thing for the art world?
I think so, and much in like getting to know Lise, the idea of like removing the veil of being intimidated by galleries and things like that. Like she seems like all about that in a very genuine and original way. Like she's, you know, she's gonna like the things she likes. She's gonna also forge relationships with artists and things like that. So I think it's all for the best. Yeah.
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 And so it's how has your work sort of progressed since you've met Lise? Because obviously these are fairly large imagery compared to the work that's in her collection.
Yeah.
What's been going on? What has been developing?
It's a good question. Like I can see connections with certainly like figurative impulses, like any of the paintings going around you. So I'll discuss the differences. Like connector points are still similar or straightforward ideas of cubism, everyday anxiety, things like that. But yeah, that was a relatively small, kind of intimate painting. What's probably happened since then, however much putting like a finger on it, is building the narrative for me, which is largely like a school trope, but having multi-figure compositions, having them interact with one another. I had a show after one that she collected from called Comedy Cellar, which was taking like the imagery from my first show, arriving at the point which was largely singular like figure painting, to paintings that had, if they had one figure, there was like a full environment in that figure. So basically getting to a point where there's multiple figures interacting with each other on a relationship almost basis, but also figures or still life environments that are in their own world, like building the world, I guess.
And yeah. I've once read that you see painting as sort of a performative act. Do you still sort of work that way? Is that still a part of your process?
It's a good question. Or probably in some of my bios, I did stand-up comedy for a short time, which was like a part of, it has been a part of the work, and then I've let it go. But yeah, I mean, largely, I mean, the paintings and the artists that I liked and have always been just sort of obsessed with, like de Kooning or Philip Guston, while I do, like, there's a quasi difference of, like, I also want to, like, go back to my observational roots and things like that, but that I also want to have a tight wire act of some level of performance when I'm painting with the canvas or things like that.
Bring them together and create sort of a story within a painting.
Yeah.